No one in America was prepared for what the Supreme Court just dropped. In a stunning unanimous 9-0 ruling, the court detonated a legal bomb that is already shaking Washington to its core. A decision so explosive it may permanently change the balance of power between federal agents and the American people. For decades, gun owners lived under a system where wrongful raids, mistaken addresses, and unconstitutional firearm seizures were nearly impossible to fight. The government held all the power, and citizens had none. But overnight, that era is over. This ruling didn't just open a door, it blew the hinges off. Federal immunity shields are collapsing. Lawsuits once dead on arrival are suddenly alive again. Agencies that used to operate untouchable are now scrambling behind closed doors to figure out how to survive what comes next. This isn't a routine update. This isn't political noise. This is the moment everything changes for gun owners, for constitutional rights, and for how far federal authority can reach into your home, your property, and your life. And if you think Washington is taking this lightly, you have no idea how deep this goes. Stay right here, because what the court ruled today will redefine the Second and Fourth Amendment battlefield for years to come. Members of the Senate are focusing on gun rights in the wake of the Supreme Court's Bruin decision. This is a major Second Amendment case. The U.S. Supreme Court has just issued a major ruling, a 9-0 bombshell that just shook the system. Imagine being raided by federal agents at the wrong address, having your firearms seized, and discovering there's no way to fight back in court. For nearly 80 years, that's been reality for thousands of Americans. But now the Supreme Court just blew a hole in the legal armor that protected these agencies. And it wasn't a split decision. It was unanimous, 9-0. This is the kind of case that changes everything. Gun owners have new legal power for the first time in a generation. Federal agents can no longer hide behind stacked immunity loopholes. Lawsuits, once dead on arrival, are now coming back to life. And Washington's top law enforcement agencies are in full panic mode. This isn't just another legal update. This is the biggest shift in federal accountability in nearly a century. And if you're a law-abiding gun owner, what just happened may finally give you real protection on your terms. Subscribe to Survival Firearms right now for the real legal breakdowns mainstream media won't touch. Now let's break down exactly what happened and why this 9-0 ruling is already shaking the foundations of federal authority. For nearly 8 decades, the federal government has operated under a double shield of legal immunity. No matter how wrong the raid or how innocent the victim, lawsuits were dismissed before evidence ever saw daylight. But now that wall of protection has finally been breached. The ruling targets the Federal Tort Claims Act's broad exceptions. It also narrows qualified immunity protections used by federal agents. Courts must now ask whether proper procedures were followed. Federal agencies can no longer rely solely on immunity to dismiss cases. It's the first meaningful challenge to federal agent protection in over 70 years, and agencies are scrambling to adjust. Within hours of the ruling, law enforcement agencies were meeting behind closed doors, not to celebrate the law, but to survive it. Directors and legal teams knew instantly this ruling wasn't symbolic. It had teeth. Internal memos were issued to update raid protocols. Emergency legal briefings were held across the FBI, ATF, DEA, and U.S. Marshals. Dozens of previously dismissed cases may now be reopened. Agency heads fear exposure from past misconduct under new scrutiny. Federal directors aren't just worried about tomorrow's raids. They're terrified that yesterday may come back to haunt them. For gun owners, this ruling isn't theoretical. It's practical and overdue. For the first time, wrongful firearm seizures during mistaken raids can be legally challenged in court with a real chance of success. Victims can sue not just for the return of firearms, but for constitutional violations. Discovery is now allowed, forcing agencies to share internal documents. Legal teams can finally access training manuals and procedural notes. Wrongful gun confiscation is now vulnerable to court challenge. This opens a path for financial compensation and faster resolution, changing the legal battlefield entirely for gun owners. After the Supreme Court's 9-0 ruling, the Department of Justice didn't hold a press conference. It didn't issue a formal statement. Instead, it immediately went into crisis mode. A confidential task force was quickly assembled inside the DOJ to evaluate what this ruling could mean for its law enforcement operations across the country. The DOJ began reviewing thousands of past raids for potential legal exposure. Use of force policies, especially regarding entry and firearm seizure, were ordered for internal review. Supervisors warned field agents to double-check address verification and evidence thresholds. Top DOJ officials initiated back-channel discussions with lawmakers about possibly restoring broader immunity. This wasn't just about a single case. It was a quiet admission that for decades, the DOJ operated with near-total legal protection. And now that protection may be crumbling, the government knows what's coming next: lawsuits, oversight, and accountability. And it is doing everything it can to stay ahead of the storm. In the past, if your firearms were taken during a mistaken federal raid, getting them back could take months, sometimes years, even if you were innocent. But this ruling may have ended that delay. The court's decision creates a legal opening for gun owners to demand the immediate return of their firearms through emergency court action. Federal courts can now issue injunctive relief, compelling the return of seized firearms. Judges are being encouraged to treat prolonged firearm holds as potential civil rights violations. Pending investigations can no longer justify holding legally owned weapons indefinitely. Gun owners may now use this ruling to bypass internal agency procedures and go straight to federal court. This gives everyday Americans a fast, court-backed process to protect their property and their rights. No more red tape, no more endless silence. If your firearms were wrongfully taken, the law now offers a clear path to get them back and hold the agency accountable for taking them in the first place. Although this case focused on federal agents, the legal impact won't stop there. State agencies, especially those involved in firearms regulation and enforcement, will now face added scrutiny. If they mirror federal procedures, they may soon be held to the same legal standard. State police departments often partner with federal agencies on firearm raids. Joint task forces that conduct seizures may now fall under federal court review. State legislatures may be forced to revise laws to avoid future conflict. Lawsuits could now combine state and federal claims under this precedent. This decision sends a loud message to both state and federal authorities that unchecked power is no longer protected and cooperation no longer means immunity. One of the government's favorite tools was using procedural loopholes to get cases dismissed before discovery even began. That door just slammed shut. The Supreme Court made it clear that courts cannot avoid accountability by leaning on exceptions. Courts must now examine whether an agent's actions truly fall under policy scope. They must allow plaintiffs a path to discovery before dismissing on technical grounds. The ruling overrides past interpretations of discretionary function immunity. Lower courts are now bound to provide greater access to due process. For too long, judges dismissed suits on page 1. That era is over. Victims will now get a real chance to present facts and challenge misconduct. Gun owners across America have watched countless cases dismissed without explanation. Now, legal doors that were sealed shut are cracking open. This ruling could launch a wave of Second Amendment lawsuits across all 50 states. Law firms are already preparing to reopen dismissed firearm seizure claims. Pro-gun legal organizations see new potential for Fourth and Second Amendment alignment. Wrongful red flag enforcement may now be challenged under this precedent. Financial settlements may rise as the government loses immunity protections. This is the most powerful legal tool gun owners have seen in decades, and for the first time, the courts may be ready to listen. While the public may see a clear 9-0 Supreme Court decision, what is happening behind closed doors is far more complex. The ruling in Martin v. United States sent shockwaves through the legal system, but it also rattled political elites. Members of Congress, administrative agencies, and legal lobbyists are already discussing how to contain the impact. This is not just a legal loss for them. It is a disruption of long-established power. Federal agencies fear new lawsuits that will challenge their authority under this precedent. White House legal teams are preparing emergency policy reviews in response to the ruling. Key members of the Senate Judiciary Committee are meeting with DOJ officials for guidance. Progressive lawmakers are reportedly drafting legislation to limit the ruling's future scope. Gun control advocacy groups are warning that the door is now wide open for rights-based lawsuits. The ruling may have been unanimous, but the battle is far from over. Political actors who prefer expansive government power are regrouping fast. Their next move could be legislative or regulatory. But make no mistake, this verdict has triggered a full-scale strategic response. If you value constitutional limits, now is the time to stay alert and speak up. This ruling started a fire that opponents of the Second and Fourth Amendments will try to extinguish before it spreads. Martin versus the United States is more than just a Supreme Court ruling. It is the beginning of a new legal era. This 9-0 decision sets the stage for a wide range of challenges to federal power, particularly in cases involving unlawful home entry and firearm confiscation. It clarified long-standing questions about immunity and accountability, and it handed gun owners and civil liberties advocates a new weapon in the courtroom. The real power of this decision lies in its ripple effect. For too long, citizens have struggled to challenge abuse by armed government agents hiding behind layers of legal immunity. This ruling lifts that shield. It returns power to the people, forces agencies to operate within constitutional limits, and affirms that your home is not just a location. It is a protected fortress under American law. The fight is far from over, but the tide has turned. And Martin versus United States is the first domino to fall. Your rights just got stronger. This ruling didn't just change one law. It changed the power dynamic between the government and the American citizen. The Supreme Court sent a clear signal. No agency, no badge, no bureaucrat is above the Constitution. For gun owners, this is a seismic shift. If you've ever wondered whether your voice mattered, this case proves it does. Stay aware, stay engaged, and know your rights are now on stronger ground than ever before. And if you value content that breaks down the laws impacting your Second Amendment freedoms, we'll be here to keep you informed, prepared, and always protected.